Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Oscar prediction update video for the month of October. You will find that not a whole lot has changed since last time. Be I'm trying to be very punctual in when I release these videos, and I didn't want to wait too long. But yeah, there's not a whole lot that has changed. At this point, almost everything has been seen except for Color Purple and Napoleon. Foe has been seen, and we now know that that is not going to be a contender at all. But at this, by the time we get to the next prediction update, we will have gotten the Gotham nominations, and we'll start to get into the heat of award season. I'm really looking forward to that, but it starts slow. It starts slow. And as of right now, there's not a whole lot to update you on. In the case of Best Documentary Feature, there's literally nothing. I didn't feel the need to change a single thing about this category. Uh, International Feature is looking a little bit different, however. Yet there's actually been a pretty major shakedown in this category because France decided to submit The Taste of Things instead of Anatomy of a Fall. Which, first of all, we have not had a international feature category with any suspense for a long time, and I was really hoping that this category was going to be an intense race between Zone of Interest and Anatomy of a Fall, but no, it's just going to be Zone of Interest all the way through. But here's where things get interesting, because when I first heard the news that Anatomy of a Fall was not submitted by France, I was shocked, but I was even more shocked when I saw the rest of Film Twitter, Film X's reaction to this news, because I thought that this was going to be a major shakedown. This was going to change the whole race. Not just for international feature, but for Best Picture and Actress and Screenplay. And I was really surprised to learn that a lot of pundits are still predicting it to get nominated in those categories, and they're very casual about it. Like, yeah, this isn't going to change anything. It's still getting nominated. I think at the very least, we have to acknowledge that this is an obstacle, and this is a big obstacle. If we think back to last year with RRR, that movie not being India's official submission did hurt it because it was legitimately one of the most loved movies of last year, and people were very, very passionate about it. And when it missed international feature, I remember there being this narrative about could it get Best Picture regardless, and people really campaigned for it. It got Critics' Choice. It seemed possible, and then suddenly it sort of fell apart, and it just got the one nomination for Song, which it won. I think part of that is because All Quiet on the Western Front really took off unexpectedly, and there was this idea of there can only be one international film contending, and I think we may be seeing a similar sort of situation with Zone of Interest now, taking full front and center as the international contender in Best Picture. But if you are predicting Anatomy of a Fall to still get a Best Picture nomination, explain why. Because it's not that I think it's totally impossible, but I'm surprised at how confident people are, to the point where people think it's more likely that Anatomy of a Fall gets in than Zone of Interest. It just doesn't make sense to me because this has never happened before. An international feature being rejected by its own country and still getting a Best Picture nomination. I mean, something like Minari or Letters from Iwo Jima, I don't think that really counts because yes, they were not in English, but they're American films. And something like A Triangle of Sadness, not technically an English language film, it was never rejected. The country never said, no, we will not submit this. So it just feels so weird that, because it's not like people are even that surprised. People are like, oh, Taste of Things is still a good film too, but Anatomy of a Fall is obviously going to get Best Picture. And I just think people are being really naive, and usually when everyone else is doing the opposite of what I'm doing, I admit that I'm probably wrong, but this is one instance when I just don't see it. I find it difficult to imagine Anatomy of a Fall getting a Best Picture nomination, and you will see reflected in the rest of my predictions, I don't have it doing as well as I did last month. And now we come to the more boring part of this video, because this is probably going to be a boring video, and it might be one that you feel the need to pause just to mark down what my predictions are, because A lot of them really haven't changed this much. If you look at animated feature, it's basically the exact same top five, and I've done a little bit of work on the bottom five because I heard interesting things about the peasants. But you're actually going to see this recurring trend where like the top five is exactly the same, and then there's some small amount of movement on the bottom five, and this sort of repeats throughout this video. For example, best sound. Same top five. I did switch Color Purple and Poor Things, but not much of a change. And then Maestro and the Creator, I think, could potentially be contenders, but I don't really know for sure. And there haven't been a ton of big shakeups. One category where we do have something of an interesting shakeup is original song, because now that there's news about this Trolls Band Together song that is Justin Timberlake reuniting with NSYNC, that is an intriguing narrative, and the song is out and people like it. I don't think it's quite as catchy as Can't Stop the Feeling, which was, of course, nominated from the original movie, but I think there is enough of a narrative. We'll have to wait and see. Because we're assuming that Color Purple is going to have an original song, because all movie musicals do, but it might not. West Side Story did not. And we're also assuming that More For Us, which is the song that's been heavily promoted from Wish, is the big contender, but maybe there's another song later in the movie that we're not hearing yet. I really don't know. It's hard to say at this point. Outside of that, really not a ton of movement in that category, and when we look at original score, I did debate leaving some of these on, but ultimately, I don't really have. This doesn't seem like a super competitive category, at least this early out, so it feels okay to leave on Past Lives and Spider-Verse. Now, visual effects is still an interesting category, and one thing that I noticed is the creator, after the reception it got, it's not impossible that that could win this, because it has arguably the showiest effects, and it is very impressive what they were able to do on a budget that's a lot smaller than you might think. With that said, the fact that this movie is not coming anywhere near picture could hurt it. Poor Things is obviously a Best Picture contender that has flashy effects. So I think Poor Things is likelier, but I wouldn't entirely rule out the creator. I think Guardians 3 is not winning at this point. I think people are just so over the Marvel thing. And then Dungeons and Dragons, I still think is a solid nominee, and Spider-Verse, it's getting tight, but I still think maybe it can get on. Oppenheimer is either number 6 or number 1 at this point, for reasons that I've gone into in other videos. Makeup and hairstyling, there is a slight change here. I've moved up Color Purple instead of Naiad. Not really sure why I was doubting Color Purple so much to begin with, but I do think it's a contender. And there's not a whole lot else to say there. When it comes to costume design, oh, again, look, it's the same top 5. Nothing in the top 5 have moved. The bottom 5 have seen some movements. It would be interesting if Hunger Games got some recognition in this category after being deserving for some of the original films, but I don't know if the Oscars are going to touch that franchise. And for production design, again, top 5, same. You will notice that I have the creator in at number 10. That's just because I think it might be possible that movie wins visual effects, and if it does, there is an interesting trend of the visual effects winner being nominated in costume design. So keep that in mind in case that movie makes a run for visual effects. Cinematography, again, I don't really have anything to say other than I've moved Poor Things and Maestro around. Also, the more I hear about El Con, the less I'm confident about it in this category. And film editing, I've moved up a couple of things. You will see Past Lives is no longer as represented here as it once was, and I'll sort of get to that when I get to Best Picture, but I'm no longer confident in that movie to the extent that I was. Holdovers might potentially be an interesting contender in this category, because sometimes they do go for the more subtler, less noticeable editing. And I do think the editing, like, from what I've heard, harkens back to a lot of, like, 70s films in a way that might appeal to the branch. So, we'll see. Now, adapted screenplay. So I foolishly moved Dumb Money. I had it up here right before it came out because I'm like, ooh, this could be a contender, and then people very quickly let me know that it's not going to be a contender. Um, but American Fiction, I've moved that up to number 4. So yeah, let's talk about this. This movie unexpectedly won the TIFF Audience Award, which is a very, very big deal because since the expanded era of Best Picture winners, the expanded era of Best Picture, only one movie has won the TIFF Audience Award and not gone on to receive an Oscar Best Picture nomination, and that was some Lebanese film in 2011 that I don't think was even eligible for Best Picture. And so, American Fiction winning this is a very big deal because in the lead up to it, I was thinking, oh, surely Holdovers is going to win. It fits the mold perfectly. But American Fiction is an interesting film, a crowd pleaser, but a comedy and a satirical one. And so there is question of, okay, is this going to get on? Is this going to get on? I think it's going to get in for screenplay for sure. I think if nothing else, it's a solid screenplay nomination. And then I do have All of Us Strangers a little bit more hesitant about that, but something needs to take that 5th slot. And even though Zone of Interest is a big deal, I don't think that screenplay is going to be the element of the film that people are walking away from talking about. Yeah, I'm a little bit confused and tired today. Sorry if I'm not making any sense. Outside of that, it does kind of peter out after a couple of contenders. I don't think this is as strong a category as it once looked. For the longest time, I was like, adapted screenplay is much stronger than original. But looking at original now, nice segue, I don't know if that's actually the case anymore. Because it seems in both categories we have a very strong top 3. In adapted, we have Oppenheimer, Poor Things, Killers of the Flower Moon. And in original, we have Barbie, Past Lives, and Holdovers. And any one of these 3 could conceivably win. I think it's interesting. Barbie, since it made the move from adapted to original, I think it was a smart move, and I think it could pay off. But there is a part of me that wonders if the Oscars aren't just going to nominate in original. If they're just going to nominate it in adapted anyway, kind of like what they did with Whiplash, where they don't really care. So, but I do think Barbie is a well-liked film, and the strength of the writing, the strength of the humor, the strength of the America Ferrera monologue in particular is really going to compel it to win for screenplay. Although Past Lives and Holdovers do still make a case, for the longest time I was insisting that Past Lives was so far ahead of everything else in this category, and now it's got very, very steep competition. So, how the tables turn. Maestro I do think is safe for nomination, and then the last slot I will admit is close between Air and Anatomy of a Fall, and I do think Anatomy of a Fall can still get this nomination, but considering what's going on with that movie in Best Picture and in other categories, I think it's personally safer to leave it out. And I do think Air, I'll get to this a little bit later too, but this is a movie that we were all sort of, once Holdovers came out, I was like, this is the feel-good dad movie. Everyone's going to forget about Air. But now, as we're starting to enter precursor season, we haven't officially entered, but there's been a lot of screenings for Air and a lot of early pushing of Air. So I really do think that the studio's trying to make sure people don't forget about this movie. And it is well liked enough that it could still come back and still be a factor in the race. And I think the narrative of the screenwriter is definitely going to help it. If it gets one nomination, it could be for original screenplay. Best Supporting Actor. So once again, I have the same top 5, but I am aware that this category is proving to be more competitive than I initially thought. and that Willem Dafoe and Charles Melton both do make very, very strong cases for themselves contending here. Now, Downey, Gosling, Ruffalo, De Niro, they feel really safe to me, and I'm not really sure who could miss. And then Dominic Sessa, it just feels like he's gonna make it because the movie's like so heavily about the three characters, about about Giamatti and Sessa and Randolph. And people say that Giamatti and Randolph are locked to get in. So it's kind of weird that people are like, oh, but Sessa is really going to have to fight to make it in because people say so great things about that performance. It's kind of like what happened with Everything Everywhere last year, where like Michelle Yeoh and Ke Huy Quan were definitely getting on, but Stephanie Hsu really had to fight to get that nomination, which isn't fair because she's such a crucial part of the film. It's just this bias against younger newcomer actors. It's not fair. And I do think that Sessa, it just makes sense that he should get on as the newcomer slot, as a big part of that movie. But I hear such great things about Defoe and Melton too. It's tight. It's really, really tight. But I do have Sessa just barely eking it in that fifth slot. Watch out for Defoe, though. And now, with Best Supporting Actress, the time has come to talk about the real big shakeup of the past month. Lily Gladstone is now competing in the lead actress category. So, it's funny, even back when this movie first premiered at Cannes, there was talk that this could happen. And I was sort of keeping my eye open, and then I kind of forgot about it. But this does make a certain degree of sense. Having not seen the movie, I'm going to see it very soon. But this does make more sense than Michelle Williams. I think Gladstone is in more of the movie, and it's a longer movie, and she really does get a lot of time to shine and be the focus. Even back at Cannes, people were like, it's either or, it could go either way. And yeah, I'm not going to criticize this. I think well done, Gladstone. It's very smart, very bold of you. I think she was even told if she goes supporting, she's guaranteed to win the Oscar, and she's like, that doesn't matter to me. I want to have integrity. I'm the lead of this movie, and being the first Native American actress to be nominated in lead actress category is the bigger deal to her and the bigger accomplishment. So well done, Lily Gladstone. Now, much like last year, this does leave supporting actress very open. And if you remember last year, supporting actress was kind of it was open up until the very end. We didn't know who was winning until the last moment. And so this is interesting because I originally had Divine Joy Randolph, and then I was convinced at the last second to go with Daniel Brooks. I do think either one of them could win, and I do think Divine Joy Randolph could be the representative win of the holdovers. However, Daniel Brooks, I'm realizing that the Oscars do really like musicals in the supporting actress category in particular. Anna Hathaway, Ariana DeBose, Jennifer Hudson, Catherine Zeta-Jones. Being in a musical really helps you win supporting actress, and Daniel Brooks was Tony nominated for this. She didn't win, but that was the Hamilton year. So it's a big deal. Plus, she's playing the Oprah role, and Oprah is a producer on this movie. So I can easily see Oprah really going to bat and campaigning for her, kind of the same way that Rita Moreno really campaigned for Ariana DeBose. So I am ultimately going to switch to Daniel Brooks, and it's hard because I haven't seen this performance yet, but I just have a feeling. And it could be Randolph too, but at the moment I'm going with Brooks. Now, it is weird that Emily Blunt is so locked for a nomination, considering that I still feel that character is so flatly written, but she's going to go along with the movie. What can you do? And the last two slots are really tricky. I have Jodie Foster because I've heard people say that she can get in even if Benning misses, which, spoiler alert, I may or may not be predicting that scenario. And then I've decided to put America Ferrera in at number 5. I don't know how many other people are predicting Ferrera at this moment, but I just feel like she has the monologue of the year. She has the Oscar clip of the year, and I just don't think they're going to be able to resist that. It's really close because Viola Davis is right there, and if Air is going to be a contender, let's get her back in the race. And I've also heard very strong things about Penelope Cruz in Ferrari. So this is not locked by any means, but this is the top 5 that I'm going with at the moment. Best Actor is interesting because this category seems to be pretty locked between Cooper, Giamatti, Murphy, DiCaprio, and Domingo. They all seem so set in stone, and Domingo is the only one that, like, his movie isn't really contending for Best Picture, but from the reviews I've heard, like, the whole performance is one giant Oscar clip, so it does make sense that Domingo would get this nomination. But then number 6 is Jeffrey Wright, who I feel is really, really close, and he's just waiting to bump out one of the obvious 5. Like, one of these 5 is going to suddenly not make it and surprise everyone, and then Jeffrey Wright is going to sneak in there, because I've heard great things about that performance. But as of right now, I don't know. And the top 6... And the top 6 all feel so locked and so far ahead of 7, no offense, Andrew Scott, but it really does feel like the combination of 5 is going to be one of these 6, and no one else really has a realistic shot because they're all so strong. So, but speaking of them all being so strong, let's talk about Best Actress. Oh man, this category. I was having an insanely tough time getting all the nominees in here before Gladstone made the switch to lead. And then I was like, oh boy, I gotta make some cuts. What do I do? So here's what I know. Emma Stone is definitely the frontrunner, but Lily Gladstone is definitely getting nominated. And what's more, Gladstone might be the one person that can actively challenge Stone for the win. I know that it's a lot quieter and a lot subtler of a performance, but if Emma Stone is allowed to campaign, depending on when the actor's strike ends, I can see a world where Emma Stone has this attitude very similar to what Cate Blanchett had last year of, oh, I don't need to win this, I've already won, you're too kind, you should be giving your support to Gladstone, like Michelle Yeoh. It would mean so much more that person winning because they would be the first person from their ethnicity to even be nominated. So I can just see Emma Stone really being a big cheerleader for Gladstone. And I can already see the meme of, like, some award show where Gladstone wins and Stone loses, and they're like, Gladstone, sad Stone. I think because of that meme alone, don't count out Gladstone in this race. Also, don't count out Carey Mulligan, because I've heard very, very strong things about that performance as well. I think those top 3 are all locked, and then the last 2 slots are tricky. So I've decided to put Margot Robbie back in there. I just feel like the movie is such a big contender, and Robbie is such a big part of that it would feel weird for her to miss. I mean, if I'm predicting Ferrera to get the nomination, I can't not predict Robbie. She's the face of that movie. And so I feel I have to put Robbie back in there, and then that last slot is either Barrino or Huller. With all due respect to Annette Bening, I do think she's probably missing, considering the fact that her film is nowhere near the Best Picture conversation, and I know it's very baity, but I don't know, if she's not gonna win, and I don't think she is, then there's not much of a point in nominating her, because she was just nominating her so she can lose again. And so, yeah, I just don't know if I see Bening. Plus, people will talk about the character not being the most likable, and the real Diane Nyad being transphobic, so I don't know if. I just don't think this thing is gonna fly. Now, the question of Sandra Hüller or Fantasia Barrino is a tricky question. And I think a lot of people would just take out Robbie and have both of them in. But here's where I stand. Fantasia Barrino, yes, she's playing an incredibly baity role, a role that's won another actress a Tony and got a different actress Oscar nominated, but she is kind of an unknown quantity. And granted, so is Whoopi Goldberg when she did the film, but it's just really, really tight. It's a tight race, and the fact that no one's seen this performance yet means, as much as I hate doing it, I kind of feel like I had to, because Color Purple could be a big disappointment, and I want to be prepared for that. But it feels weird for me to like be predicting Danielle Brooks to win and Barrino to not be nominated. It's weird. I know it's weird. But Sandra Hüller, it's also very tempting for me to not predict her. But then I feel like I would get a ton of wrath. Because I feel like this movie is loved enough that it has to get nominated somewhere. And if it's not getting into picture, and I don't think it is, then it should get the lead actress nominated. Because people are so crazy about this performance. And to be clear, I think she could miss. But, I see the passion for her. Everyone talks about this performance, and okay, I'm gonna go with her. I'm gonna go with her. But this is killing me. It's killing me that Greta. So in Best Director, you may notice that there has been a change. Celine Song, who was at one point in time my number one, for a long point in time my number one, I now no longer am predicting her to be nominated. So we'll get to specifically why in a minute when I get to Best Picture, but I will say Director is a very, very, very crowded race, and looking at the five that I currently have, Lanthimos, Nolan, Scorsese, Glazer, Gerwig, they all make a very strong case for themselves, and Song would be getting in if the competition was a little bit weaker, but it just so happens that Best Director is extraordinarily strong this year. And I've also heard some good things about both Bradley Cooper and Alexander Payne, but I'm sort of choosing to, again, like Best Actor, I do think it comes down to the top six. Now, to get into specifically why I no longer am predicting Celine Song to be nominated, we have to get into Best Picture. So, for a very long time, I held out hope that Past Lives was going to be our Best Picture winner. But the longer I thought about it, the more time passed, it was getting harder to maintain that. Now, it does seem kind of inevitable that as the fall film festivals get started up, less and less people are talking about Past Lives. And I think it's very possible that that movie can make a resurgence. The problem is we're seeing the competition is so strong, and as I said last month, I'm no longer confident that it can get an acting nomination, and I'm also no longer confident that it can win director, even if it does get nominated. So the path for this movie to win Best Picture is getting smaller and smaller, even though I think it's definitely still going to get nominated. It's just no longer the Best Picture winner. And then I was really struggling for a long time to figure out what the Best Picture winner could be, because for the record, I don't think it's Oppenheimer. And I understand that a lot of people say that it's going to be Oppenheimer, but if there's one thing I've learned from predicting the Oscars as long as I have, you never go with the obvious contender that everyone is predicting will win in October. Because there's plenty of time between October and the Oscars for things to change. Maybe in the 90s, one movie could stay the top contender for a long period of time, but in the age of the internet and social media, it's just so impossible to, because people will get tired. There's so much talk, and every single movie there's some sort of backlash and there's some sort of drama. And when a movie is a frontrunner, is declared the frontrunner early, then there is backlash. I think there already is backlash because of people just not wanting to reward a film about Oppenheimer, no matter how well it articulates its perspective. And on top of that, the way the female characters are written. And I know that some people are saying, oh, but Oppenheimer was such a big box office success. And I always found that argument a little bit odd because the box office success of Oppenheimer feels completely secondary to Barbie. I feel like Oppenheimer would not have made anywhere near the money it did were it not for the Barbenheimer double feature trend. And so, when I was trying to figure out what's going to win Best Picture, there was a point in time when I seriously contemplated putting Barbie at number one. I understand that it would be an out there choice. We haven't had a true box office populist success win Best Picture since Return of the King. But there's just something about this movie because it's not just popular, it is the movie of the moment. It is the movie of the year, and so many people are talking about it and the themes of it and what it implies about the patriarchy and gender dynamics. And yet, I'm just not sure. When I tried to have Barbie at number one, it just didn't feel right. And ultimately, I ended up going with Poor Things. Now, I have not seen Poor Things yet, but when I listen to people talk about it, I've heard people say that they think this can win, that they think this captures a feeling in the audience that people are really, really excited about. Even though the type of movie it is, I was very hesitant, but I haven't seen it, and who am I to doubt the people who have? So, as of right now, I've heard people make comparisons to Shape of Water and Birdman, like it's just weird enough, but also just, what's the word I'm looking for? Prestigious, that's the word. Lanthimos has been nominated before, he's a well-respected director, and Emma Stone has won before, she's very well-respected. There is a ton of intrigue going on with this movie, and I think people are excited about it. So as of right now, I have Poor Things at number one. It's not a sure thing, but I don't think it's going to be Oppenheimer. Killers, maybe, but of those who have seen it, there's not a ton of enthusiasm that this can win. Nominated, sure, but I'm hearing people say that it could get nominated, that it could be nominated for a bunch of stuff and not win anything. And Oppenheimer, I know that there's this idea that Nolan can win director, and I still think that's possible, but I just don't know. So as of right now, I have Poor Things predicted to win. Looking at the rest of the nominees, Past Lives, Maestro, Holdovers should be safe to get on. Zone of Interest, I think, is the international contender of the year. I have Anatomy of a Fall at 11, and even I recognize that's being incredibly generous given all the things I said about it, but really, there's not a ton of stuff in the 11 to 15 range that I think can get nominated. It seems Color Purple, we're just crossing our fingers that that's just as good as these other contenders, and American Fiction, I think, should be able to squeeze into that last slot. I know I don't have it nominated for Best Actor, but if Women Talking could get in on picture and screenplay alone last year, then I think American Fiction should be able to do the same thing. Now, again, I think Air is possible. Priscilla and All of Us Strangers, there are some rumblings about those, but I don't think either of them can fully cross over. And Spider-Verse, I've basically given up on at this point. I have it getting nominated for 3 awards, Animated Feature, Original Score, and Visual Effects, which is impressive for an animated film. I think it's going to be able to get some precursors, that it stays in the race and is a possibility right up until nominations. What I'm really hoping is that there's just enough of a push behind it that when the third movie comes out and it's the finale and it wraps up the story, that's when we go, okay, let's get this done. Let's get an animated film into Best Picture for the first time since Toy Story 3. I've been burnt so many times, and people made me think it was going to happen with this movie. I don't think it is. I think the competition's just too tight, but I'd love to be wrong, and maybe the third movie is the one to finally break that barrier. So, that's everything. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.